What's going on YouTube? This is Ryba back at the bench, and today I've got another cut or carry knife review. This time looking at the Demko 20.5. This is a knife that I think is becoming kind of a, I don't want to say a cult classic, but it's definitely becoming popular in the knife community, and I was super excited to finally get to try one out. First things first, sorry for the delay. I have never been the most consistent poster, but I've also just welcomed another baby into our family. So life's been a bit disrupted recently. You can also probably tell I also have a little cold. So just kind of running behind a little bit, but I'm back trying to record some of these and share thoughts on some of the latest gear that I've gotten to try. So Demko 20.5. Now for me, I have never tried a Demko branded knife. Certainly have tried, and carried a few different Demko designs. I think really the stuff that he used to do with cold steel, the 8015, 8010, I think I reviewed one or two of those a few years ago. And those were always really cool, really interesting. I think he definitely has a very unique and distinctive design, tends towards the larger knives, and particularly with cold steel, kind of once you marry those two, cold steel is the maker and Demko is the designer, you get some really, really robust knives, and I think maybe a little bit overly so. But this is the first actual Demko that I have carried, and I saw this one on Reddit and grabbed it. Now this is not stock. I typically am a stock guy, and I've been deviating from that a little bit recently, just as kind of knife interests change a little bit. And so I did, these are RGT TerraTough scales. I carry these, or have been carrying these on my Para 3, and have really been enjoying this. So I've got these TerraTough scales on here. It also has the back spacer to match there. And then these are on skiffs bearings. And so I've got all the stock parts and I've carried it that way. It's on the deep carry clip as well. But I've really been enjoying carrying it this way, and so I didn't want to switch everything back out for the video, but maybe offer an opportunity to try and show off some of the aftermarket parts that I have traditionally not shown off. So just full disclosure, that's what's going on here. So, okay, overview. This is AUS 10, like I said, on the skiffs bearing steep carry clip. The RGT scales, and then this features I think it's called the Shark Lock. So this is a Demko design. When I think of the 80 series before, I think of that, that very distinctive lock. And so you have something similar here in the Shark Lock, and this takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's pretty cool. And so basically the way you disengage it, and it's gonna be tough to do this on camera, but you just pull this back. There's a spring inside there. I did, strip this knife down, swap scales and parts and stuff, and I think if you get the hang of it, it would not be a pain to do that, but it's kind of a pain at first just to figure it out because there's a spring in there and you have to kind of line things up correctly. For what it is and for the design that it is, I actually thought it was pretty easy to take apart and put back together. But basically you can obviously deploy this knife with the thumb stud there or with that cutout. But you can also just pull back on this lock and flip it open and kind of flip it shut. Again, it's tough to do that on camera. It is super smooth. It has that same kind of, I don't know, it does remind you of the triad lock a little bit in some ways. You can see how that snaps in there. But it's super smooth, and overall it's a very fidgety knife. I think that's what a lot of people like about the Shark Lock, but I also think it's just a very practical lock. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm getting into the review. We are 4 minutes in. I haven't even done the size comparison, so let me do that really quick. I grabbed the only cold steel that I have still, code 4, just for a size comparison. So it is not a small knife. I've also got, we'll just throw the Para 3 on there as well. So you can see it actually lines up a little bit closer to the Para 3, although it feels like a much bigger knife. It is much heavier. more robust. You can probably see that here. The blade is certainly thicker and a little bit more robust. And then let me just, I haven't featured my favorite knife in a while, so the Sebenza 31 small. Okay, so you can see it is a pretty large knife, not crazy big, not cold steel big, but good size knife. Okay, let's get into the likes and dislikes. So likes, the first thing is this is an incredibly ergonomic knife. Reminds me in some ways of a Manix 2 in the sense that it does have pretty defined finger choils and finger kind of contours here, even with that kind of front choil if you decide to choke up. This is a hit or miss thing. Some knives really get this wrong. This one does not. This feels very, very good in the hand, fits right in the hand. And that can be a very specific thing, but I have heard from other guys that they also find this to be a very comfortable knife. Particularly with these TerraTough scales, I find this to just be really, really nice in the hand. So it's very ergonomic with one little caveat that I'll talk about in a few minutes. The other thing, so this has that distinguished kind of Demko feel to it. It's got that very defined or distinctive design, but it doesn't feel overbuilt necessarily. It feels, well built and certainly robust, but it doesn't feel overbuilt like some of the cold steels would. And what I mean by that is when I tried to carry and I'm blanking on which AD I carried before, but when I tried some of those older cold steel Demko designs, I didn't actually want to carry them. They were just too heavy, too bulky, too thick. This one though is perfect. I have been carrying this knife a ton, and it's one that I do want to throw in the pocket. Kind of a PM2, and I don't even have my PM2 anymore, so I couldn't compare that. But it is definitely a larger knife, but not one that I don't want to carry. And so I really, really like that about it. The other thing, I really like the shark lock. I like that there are different ways to open the knife. I like that it's super smooth, but I really like the shark lock. Sure, it is fidgety, but it is also incredibly practical. When you pull this out of the pocket, all you have to do to open it is kind of throw it out like that. And I've used this thing for a variety of chores around the yard, around the house. This is just very practical. It is something that can just be kind of thrown out like that. And so for all the fidgetiness, it is actually a very, very functional design. And so I really, really like that. I think it's really, really neat to have a knife with such a distinctive lock like that, and one that is so practically useful. Disassembly is something that initially I was pretty frustrated by, but once I kind of got it, I was actually really impressed by. This was, once you kind of understand how the knife is made and how the different parts fit together, it's actually pretty easy to put back together. There are just some little subtle things that I can't really show unless I were to take it down, which I am not even going to attempt to do on camera. Just where some things fit together really nicely. There were some, some parts that were just kind of made to drop in and really help the user do that. So as a knife designer, that's really encouraging or helping users to do things like swap out scales and backspacers and bearings and things like that, and not discouraging it like some knife makers would. So I really appreciated that. I found it pretty easy to do. Scales, so I don't even have the default scales on hand. I think they were fine, nice, perfectly acceptable for stock scales, but I've really enjoyed these RGT scales as well. I'll probably at some point do a review just on the TerraTough scales, but just wanted to mention that. The other thing that I really like, I think I mentioned the size already. I think the size is good for that larger carry, but the blade. So this is the clip point. I think there's a couple different configurations, but this is kind of a stone washed clip point here. And I have found this to be a really nice blade. It is definitely beefy. It is definitely a meatier blade. Like you compare this to something like the Para 3, like you can just tell it's definitely a beefier blade. But I've found this to be very practical. I am tending towards Scandi grinds recently, and it's certainly not that. But I have an appreciation for this now. And so it's maybe a little bit thicker than something that I would have carried in the past. But I'm really, really enjoying this. You know, it is now, granted, my chores in the last couple weeks is more like cutting up fruit for my kids. But it's doing everything really well. And it's something that, you know, I package up a lot of packages every day for my business. I am doing kind of house chores and stuff. So I'm opening packages, I'm cutting, packing material, etc. all the time. And I'm also just cutting food for kids. And this has done everything really, really nice. It's been a really, really smooth slicer as well, which was something I was a little bit worried about at first, but it's done everything very, very well. Now, my dislikes on this knife, there's only really one. The shark lock, so it can take some practice. It is definitely not something that you can pick up and just immediately do. It does take a little bit of practice, and it can be kind of uncomfortable, honestly. It is, you know, that point right there, while it is jimped, is still a little bit sharp, or not sharp, but maybe just a, you know, a defined 90 degrees or close to it right there. It's not the most comfortable thing. Man, it's difficult to do on camera. But my bigger issue with it is what this does to the grip. So when I'm holding the knife, my thumb wants to be right there, and that is just not comfortable. So the jimping is fine. I like this jimping here. I wish there was a way to marry these so that you did not have that weird ramp, because my thumb wants to be way up here. So that is, to me, the one drawback of the knife, is that is incredibly uncomfortable. The rest of the knife feels like a dream, and if you're holding it like this, that's great, or like a pinch grip, that's great. But what am I doing with this knife? A lot of times I'm grabbing it to maybe cut into a package or something like this, and that's where my thumb wants to go, and that does not feel good at all. So usually I'm grabbing it there and then I'm adjusting my grip to do something else. Not ideal. However, with that style lock, I don't see a way around it. So I don't really have anything to offer, except for it does make it kind of uncomfortable. Overall, though, I love this knife. I really was just expecting to pick this up, review it, flip it, and flip it, like, you know, get it out of the collection and kind of be done with it. But this one's hanging around, at least for a little bit. I don't know if it'll be a long-term hold, but I like it a lot more than I expected, and especially once you add some of the kind of aftermarket parts. This is a phenomenal knife, and really a great mod project, or kind of great building block, I think, to a really, really fun carry. So this has effectively replaced the PM2 in my collection right now. So I'm a big fan, would love to hear what you think in the comments, and this has probably got me checking out some other Demkos in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. I'll see you next time. You'll watch me next time. Something will happen next time. See ya.